January 13th, 1842. Jalalabad, British India. The sentry on the eastern wall sees him first, a lone figure staggering across the snowfield, swaying in the saddle of a half-dead pony. The animal's ribs press against its hide like the bars of a cage. The rider is slumped forward, one arm hanging limp, his uniform so caked in frozen blood it's nearly black. Rider approaching, the sentry shouts. Officers rush to the ramparts. They raise their telescopes. Someone recognizes the tattered remnants of a British medical officer's coat. The gates swing open. Soldiers sprint across the frozen ground. The rider slides from his pony and collapses face first into the snow. General Sir Robert Sale, commander of the Jalalabad garrison, kneels beside him. The man's head is wrapped in a filthy bandage. His face so blackened by frostbite and powder burns, he's barely recognizable as human. Where is the column? Sale demands. Where is General Elphinstone? Where are the troops? The man's eyes open, pale, haunted, empty. His voice comes out as a whisper. I am the column. Sale leans closer. What? I am the army. 16,500 people left Kabul 7 days ago. One man made it out. His name is Dr. William Brydon. And this is the story of how an entire British army was swallowed by the mountains of Afghanistan. And why more than 180 years later, those mountains are still called the graveyard of empires. If this story grips you the way it gripped me when I first learned it, hit that like button and drop a comment below. It genuinely helps us bring more forgotten history to light. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. December 1841, Kabul, Afghanistan. The snow falls soft and silent on the British cantonment, covering everything in white. The low mud brick walls, the scattered barracks, the parade ground where no one parades anymore. Dr. William Brydon stands at the window of the medical quarters, watching flakes settle on the shoulders of sentries who stamp their feet against the cold and glance nervously toward the city. He's 29 years old, an assistant surgeon with the East India Company's Army of the Indus. He's not a soldier. He's a doctor, but he's been in Afghanistan long enough to recognize the smell of disaster. The cantonment is a masterpiece of military stupidity. It sprawls across nearly a square mile of open ground northeast of Kabul, far too large to defend with the forces available. The walls are barely 5 feet high in places, low enough for a man to leap over. The ammunition stores are scattered in separate buildings across the compound instead of centralized. The commissariat, where all the food is kept, sits on the far edge of the cantonment, exposed and vulnerable. Worst of all, the entire position is overlooked by a fortress called the Bala Hissa, held by Afghan forces and by a series of low hills that offer perfect fields of fire into the compound. Brydon had heard the arguments when the cantonment was built 2 years ago. The chief engineer warned it was indefensible. Major Eldred Pottinger, the political officer, called it suicide. But Sir William Macnaghten, the British envoy to Afghanistan, the man who orchestrated this entire doomed occupation, insisted on grandeur. We are here to civilize, Macnaghten had said. We must project strength and permanence. Now, in December of 1841, 16,500 people are trapped inside those low walls, and the city of Kabul is turned against them. The cant holds 4,500 fighting men. The 44th Regiment of Foot, the 5th Light Cavalry, the Shah's 6th Regiment, multiple Bengal native infantry battalions, irregular cavalry, and artillery companies. They are British officers and soldiers, Indian Seppo, irregular Afghan troops loyal to Shah Hua, the puppet king the British installed. And then there are the 12,000 camp followers. This is the invisible army that follows every East India Company force into the field. Wives and children of British soldiers and SEO, personal servants, grooms, cooks, merchants, blacksmiths, water carriers, sweepers, laresses, the entire civilian infrastructure necessary to sustain a 19th century military occupation. Brydon treats them all. Frostbite, dysentery, malnutrition, knife wounds from brawls over the last scraps of firewood. He does what he can with dwindling supplies and no hope of resupply. The city's bazaars have been closed to the British for weeks. The Afghan chiefs, once bribed into submission with British gold, have risen in open revolt under the leadership of Akbar Khan, son of the deposed Amir Das Muhammad. On November 2, 1841, a mob stormed the home of Sir Alexander Burnes, Macnaghten's deputy, a man who spoke fluent Persian and believed he understood Afghan politics, and tore him apart in the street. His brother, Lieutenant Charles Burnes, died beside him. Their bodies were dragged through the Kabul bazaar, while British officers watched from the cantonment walls and debated whether to intervene. They decided not to. Major General William Elphinstone, the garrison commander, called a council of war. Officers argued for hours. Brigadier John Shelton demanded an immediate assault to rescue Burnes. Elphinstone hesitated. Macnaghten urged caution. By the time a decision was made, Burnes was dead and the city was in full revolt. That was when Brydon knew they were all dead men. He turns from the window and walks through the medical ward. 40 men lie on CS, most suffering from frostbite or fever. British privates, SEO from the Bengal regiments. Irregular cavalry. A gunner from the artillery who lost 3 fingers to frostbite and infection. Brydon checks the gunner's hand. The stumps are healing poorly. Without proper medical supplies, gangrene is setting in. "Am I going home, doctor?" the gunner asks. Brydon meets his eyes. "You'll be on your feet soon enough." It's a lie, but it's a kind one. Outside, a distant crack of gunfire echoes from the hills. Brydon doesn't flinch. The sniping has been constant for days. Afghan Ghazis picking off sentries, officers, anyone foolish enough to stand in the open. The British try to return fire, but the enemy is invisible, shooting from rooftops and compounds, vanishing before retaliation arrives. The cantonment is not under siege. It's under slow strangulation. Brydon steps outside into the compound. The cant is crowded, chaotic, a small city crammed inside inadequate walls. Near the western wall, he sees clusters of camp followers. Women and children huddled around small fires, trying to stay warm. The wives of British soldiers from the 44th Regiment. The families of sepoys from the 27th and 35th Bengal Native Infantry. Afghan servants who worked for British officers and are now trapped. Neither British nor fully Afghan, belonging nowhere. Children play in the snow, their faces red with cold. Mothers watch them with hollow eyes. These 12,000 people are entirely dependent on the soldiers for protection. They have no weapons. Most have no winter clothing adequate for the Afghan winter. If the cantonment falls, they fall with it. Brydon watches a woman trying to cook over a tiny fire made from scraps of wood. She has 3 children, all under the age of 10. The smallest is coughing, a wet, rattling sound that Brydon recognizes. Pneumonia, probably. Without medicine, the child will be dead within a week. He doesn't approach. There's nothing he can give her. His medical stores are nearly empty. He walks across the parade ground toward the officers' quarters. The cantonment is organized by rank and unit. British officers have their own compound. The enlisted men of the 44th Regiment are barracked separately. The sepoy battalions have their own lines. The cavalry is quartered near the stables, and the camp followers fill every remaining space, clustering wherever they can find shelter. Near the eastern wall, he passes the lines of the 44th Regiment of Foot, Her Majesty's 44th, the only British infantry regiment in the garrison. 2 companies, about 200 men, commanded by officers who've served in India for years. They're professionals, disciplined, but Brydon can see the strain in their faces. Weeks of short rations, constant sniping, the knowledge that they're trapped. The sepoy battalions are in worse shape. The men of the 27th, 35th, and 37th Bengal Native Infantry are loyal. They fought for the company for years, some for decades, but they're far from home, surrounded by hostile forces, commanded by British officers who are paralyzed by indecision. Rumors spread through the sepoy lines that the British will abandon them, take the cavalry and European troops, and leave the Indian soldiers to negotiate their own surrender with Akbar Khan. Brydon doesn't know if the rumors are true, but he knows fear when he sees it. Major General William Elphinstone commands the garrison. He is 60 years old, crippled by gout and rheumatism, and utterly incapable of making a decision. Brydon saw him once 2 weeks ago at a medical inspection. The general had to be helped from his horse. His hands shook. His face was gray. He looked like a man already dead, waiting for someone to tell him he could lie down. Elphinstone had been a good officer once, 40 years ago under Wellington at Waterloo. But that man is long gone, replaced by an invalid who spends his days in his quarters, writing letters to his superiors in India, begging for permission to retreat. The permission never comes, and so the cantonment rots. The command structure is paralyzed by infighting. Brigadier John Shelton, Elphinstone's second in command, openly despises the general and makes no effort to hide it. Shelton is aggressive, arrogant, and contemptuous of the camp followers, whom he calls useless mouths. He advocates for an immediate attack on Kabul to reassert British control. Sir William Macnaghten, the political envoy, refuses. He still believes negotiation is possible. He still believes he can manage Afghan politics through gold and diplomacy. Major Eldred Pottinger, a political officer who was wounded defending the Kohistan region before retreating to Kabul, urges an immediate fighting withdrawal to Jalalabad, 90 miles to the east. We break out now, he argues in the councils of war. Before the passes fill with snow, we take the cavalry, the best infantry, travel light, and fight our way through. And the camp followers, Elphinstone asks, we leave a volunteer rear guard with them and negotiate their surrender separately. We do not abandon British women and children. They will die if we stay. Pottinger snaps. We negotiate. And so they do nothing. Supplies dwindle. Firewood runs out. Men begin burning furniture and saddles than anything that will catch flame. The temperature drops below freezing every night. Sentries are found frozen at their posts. The horses, starving and weak, begin to die. The cavalry slaughter them for meat. Brydon watches it all from the medical quarters and understands with cold clarity that the leadership has failed. Elphinstone cannot decide. Shelton and Macnaghten cannot agree. Pottinger is ignored. He begins preparing for the inevitable. He packs a small medical kit, bandages, surgical needles, a scalpel, his last 2 bottles of laudanum. He acquires a pistol from a dying artillery officer, a lieutenant who took a gazelle ball through the lung and knows he won't survive. The lieutenant hands Brydon the pistol and 12 rounds of ammunition. You'll need this more than me, Doctor. Brydon secures a pony from the stables, a scrawny, tough little animal from the Afghan hills, the kind that can survive on almost nothing. He feeds it from his own rations, hoarding scraps of grain. The other surgeons notice his preparations, but say nothing. They're making their own plans. On December 11th, the Council of War convenes in Macnaghten's quarters. Brydon is not present, but he hears the outcome within an hour. Macnaghten has made contact with Akbar Khan. The Afghan leader has offered terms. The British will be allowed to withdraw to Jalalabad with honor. They may keep their personal arms and 6 artillery pieces, light mountain guns. In exchange, they will leave Kabul peacefully and never return. It is the best we can hope for, Macnaghten announces. Pottinger, still recovering from his wound, argues against it. It is a trap. Akbar Khan wants us in the passes where we cannot maneuver. He will slaughter us. He has given his word as a chief, Macnaghten insists. He gave Sir Alexander Burns assurances. They found pieces of him in 3 different streets. Elphinstone says nothing. He stares at his hands as if they belong to someone else. The vote is called. The majority sides with Macnaghten. They will accept Akbar Khan's terms. They will leave Kabul. When Brydon hears the news, he walks out into the snow and stares at the mountains to the east. The Hindu Kush rises in jagged white peaks, beautiful and merciless. Somewhere beyond those peaks lies Jalalabad, 90 meters, 5 mountain passes in winter. He thinks about the 12,000 camp followers who have never marched through mountain passes, who have no weapons, who are already starving. He thinks about 60-year-old General Elphinstone trying to command a fighting retreat. He thinks about Akbar Khan's promise of safe passage. Then he goes back inside and adds 3 more rounds of ammunition to his kit. December 23, 1841. Sir William Macnaghten rides out of the cantonment to meet Akbar Khan in person. He takes 3 officers with him, Captain Robert Trevor, Captain George Lawrence, and Lieutenant John Airy. The meeting is supposed to finalize the terms of the British withdrawal. Macnaghten is confident he has negotiated with Afghan chiefs for 2 years. He believes he understands them. Benin is in the medical quarters when the shout goes up from the walls. They've taken him. He runs outside. Other officers are already racing toward the ramparts. Brydon climbs the ladder to the walkway and stares across the snowy field. The meeting ground is half a mile away, near a low compound. Macnaghten's party is surrounded by Afghan horsemen. Too many moving too fast. There is a struggle. Horses rear. Men shout. A gunshot cracks across the stillness. Macnaghten is dragged from his saddle. Brydon watches frozen as the British envoy disappears into the mass of riders. Lieutenant Airy is shot and falls from his horse. Captain Trevor is pulled from his mount, screaming. Captain Lawrence tries to fight his way to Macnaghten and is overwhelmed. The Afghans wheel their horses and gallop toward Kabul, dragging something behind them. It takes Brydon a moment to realize it's Macnaghten's body. The cantonment explodes into chaos. Officers run from building to building, shouting orders, countermanding each other. Shelton demands an immediate assault on the city. Pottinger argues for an instant breakout toward Jalalabad. Elphinstone locks himself in his quarters and will not come out. By evening, the news filters back from the city. Macnaghten's severed head is on display in the Kabul bazaar. His hands have been cut off and paraded through the streets on pikes. Afghan chiefs are celebrating in the Bala Hissar. Captain Lawrence, badly wounded, is the only officer who makes it back alive. He's brought to the medical quarters. Brydon treats his wounds, a sword cut across the forearm, deep bruises from being beaten. Lawrence lies on the cot, trembling, staring at the ceiling. "It was planned," Lawrence whispers. "All of it. They were waiting." "I know," Brydon says quietly. "Are we getting out of here?" "I don't know." Lawrence closes his eyes and doesn't speak again. That night, a messenger arrives from Akbar Khan. Despite the unfortunate incident involving Macnaghten, the offer of safe passage still stands. The British may leave with their personal arms and limited artillery. They will not be harmed. The senior officers convene another council. Pottinger, exhausted and furious, makes one final argument. This is bait. He murders our envoy and then renews his promise. He wants us in the passes. We must fight our way out now, tonight, with the cavalry and the strongest units. It's brutal, but it's our only chance. And abandon 12,000 people? Someone asks. They're dead either way. At least give the fighting men a chance. Elphinstone, emerging from his quarters for the first time in days, his face gray and haggard, shakes his head. We are British officers. We do not abandon women and children. The vote is called. They will accept Akbar Khan's terms. They will leave on January 6, 1842. Brydon hears the decision and feels something cold settle in his chest. They're all going to die. Not all at once, not in a single battle, but slowly over days in the frozen passes between Kabul and Jalalabad. He returns to his quarters and checks his preparations one final time. Pistol, 12 rounds, medical kit, limited supplies, pony, barely fed, but still standing, papers from home, letters from his family in Scotland, medical notes, a sketch his sister sent. He folds them carefully and tucks them into his military cap, layering them against the inner lining. He doesn't know why. The papers are worthless, but leaving them behind feels like abandoning the last piece of himself. That isn't a surgeon, isn't a soldier, isn't a man about to walk into hell. Outside, the snow continues to fall. Inside the cantonment, 16,500 people prepare to leave. Most of them don't know they're preparing to die. December 24th, 1841. The day after the murder, the cantonment is paralyzed. Brydon moves through the medical quarters in the gray dawn light, stepping over men who haven't slept. Some are weeping. Others sit in silence, staring at nothing. A young subaltern from the 5th Light Cavalry vomits in a corner, then wipes his mouth and vomits again. No one speaks of retreat anymore. No one speaks of negotiation. They only speak of what they saw from the walls. Macnaghten's hands, severed at the wrists, displayed on poles in the Kabul bazaar. His head mounted on a pike outside the Bala Hissar fortress. His legs dragged through the streets by crowds celebrating the death of the British envoy. Captain George Lawrence lies on a cot in the corner, the only officer from yesterday's meeting party to survive. I treated him through the night. A deep sword cut across the forearm, severe bruising across his ribs and back from being beaten. Lawrence stares at the ceiling, his lips moving in silent repetition of the same words. They were waiting. It was planned, all of it. I change his bandages in silence. When I finish, he grabs my wrist. We're not getting out of here, are we, Doctor? I look into the captain's eyes and see a man who already knows the answer. No. Lawrence nods slowly, as if the confirmation brings some kind of relief. Then he releases my wrist and turns his face to the wall. By mid-morning, the command structure has collapsed entirely. General Elphinstone refuses to leave his quarters. His servant reports the general is bedridden, his gout so severe he cannot stand. Brigadier Shelton storms through the cantonment, shouting contradictory orders. Prepare to assault Kabul. No, form a defensive perimeter. No, organize for withdrawal. The soldiers don't know who to obey. The sepoy battalions wait for orders that never come. The cavalry tends to dying horses. The camp followers huddle in doorways, watching British officers run from building to building in obvious panic. It's Major Eldred Pottinger who finally restores a semblance of order. He's still recovering from a gunshot wound to his shoulder, his arm in a sling, his face gray with pain. But his voice cuts through the chaos like a blade. Form up your companies. He shouts at the officers of the 44th Regiment. Get your men into defensive positions along the walls. Artillery, position your guns to cover the gates. Move. The officers scramble to obey. Pottinger is not the senior commander, but he's the only one giving clear, decisive orders. In a crisis, clarity is command. I watch him from the doorway of the medical quarters. Pottinger moves like a man who knows he's dying, but refuses to lie down. There's something relentless about it. One foot in front of the other, one order after another, as if momentum alone can hold back the inevitable. By noon, a messenger arrives from the city. He's an Afghan boy, no more than 12, carrying a sealed letter. The sentries nearly shoot him before Captain Colin Mackenzie of the Shah's 6th Regiment intervenes and brings the boy to the officer's compound. The letter is addressed to the British command. It's written in Persian. Pottinger breaks the seal and reads it aloud to the assembled officers, translating as he goes. The message is from Akbar Khan. He expresses profound regret for the unfortunate incident involving Sir William Macnaghten. He blames rogue elements beyond his control, tribal chiefs whose passions overwhelmed their judgment. He assures the British that he personally did not order the killing. and he reaffirms his offer. The British may withdraw to Jalalabad with honor. They will not be harmed. They have his word. Pottinger finishes reading and looks up at the assembled officers. 20 men stare back at him. Captains, lieutenants, subalterns, the remaining leadership of a dying garrison. He's lying, Pottinger says flatly. Shelton steps forward. We have no choice. We cannot hold through winter. Supplies are exhausted. The men are on quarter rations. Another week, and we'll be eating the dead. And we fight our way out tonight. The cavalry, the 44th, the strongest SEO companies. We move fast and fight through and abandon 12,000 camp followers. They will die in the passes anyway, but a fighting column might reach Jalalabad. Shelton's face hardens. I will not put my name to an order that abandons British women and children to slavery and death. Then you'll put your name to an order that kills them in the snow instead. The argument continues for an hour. Voices rise. Men shout over each other. Captain Mackenzie suggests sending another envoy to negotiate better terms. Lieutenant Henry Harding of the 5th Light Cavalry proposes surrendering the cantonment entirely and throwing themselves on Akbar Khan's mercy as prisoners of war. Pottinger listens to it all with growing disgust. Finally, he turns and walks out of the meeting. Brydon is waiting outside. They're going to accept the offer, aren't they? Pottinger stops his back to Brydon. Yes, even though it's a trap. Yes. Why? Pottinger turns. His face is haggarded, hollowed out by pain and exhaustion, and the weight of being the only man in the garrison who sees clearly what's coming. Because the alternative is admitting we came here for nothing. That we invaded this country, installed a puppet king no one wanted, occupied Kabul for 2 years, and bled ourselves dry for no purpose. Men cannot accept that. So they choose the lie that lets them believe there's still hope. He walks away across the frozen parade ground, his breath steaming in the cold air. Brydon stands alone watching him go. That night, the decision is formalized. The British will accept Akbar Khan's terms. They will leave Kabul on January 6, 1842. The days between December 24th and January 6th are a slow descent into hell. Supplies run out entirely. The garrison is on starvation rations. 4 ounces of grain per day, shared between soldiers and camp followers. Men slaughter the last of the cavalry horses for meat. The 5th Light. Cavalry once mounted on some of the finest horses in India is now largely on foot. The animals are butchered and divided among the troops. The camp followers are in worse condition. The 12,000 civilians have no organized supply system. They survive on scraps, on charity from soldiers who can barely feed themselves, on whatever they can scavenge from the increasingly bare cantonment. Brydon sees children with distended bellies, the classic sign of starvation. He sees women boiling leather straps to make a kind of soup. He sees old men sitting motionless in the snow, too weak to move, waiting to die. Firewood is gone. Families burn their furniture, their carts, their children's toys, anything that will produce heat. The temperature drops to 10 below zero at night. Sentries are found frozen at their posts, their hands still gripping their muskets, their eyes open and glazed. The medical quarters overflow. Brydon works without rest, treating frostbite, dysentery, pneumonia, starvation. He amputates blackened toes and fingers with a dull scalpel because he has no other tools. He doses men with the last of his laudanum and watches them die anyway. A gunner from the artillery is brought in with both feet frozen solid. Brydon examines him and shakes his head. I can take the feet, but you won't survive the shock. Not in your condition. The gunner looks up at him with sunken eyes. Do it anyway, doctor. I do not wish to die whole. Brydon performs the amputation. The man dies 3 hours later. On January 1st, 1842, the final terms are negotiated. Akbar Khan's representatives meet with the British officers outside the cantonment. The agreement is formalized. The British will leave on January 6th. They may take their personal arms, rifles, pistols, swords. They may take 6 artillery pieces. All 9-pound mountain guns light enough to be moved quickly. All heavy guns will be spiked and abandoned. The British will provide hostages as a guarantee of good behavior. Senior officers and their families will be placed in Akbar Khan's protective custody until the column reaches Jalalabad safely. Then the hostages will be released. The hostages will include wives and children of officers. A deliberate choice to ensure the British keep to the agreement. In return, Akbar Khan pledges that the column will not be attacked. They will have safe passage through the passes. When the terms are announced to the garrison, a murmur runs through the troops. The sepoys of the Bengal native infantry mutter to each other in Hindustani. The men of the 44th Regiment exchange dark looks. The cavalry officers argue quietly among themselves. Everyone understands what the hostage clause means. The British are handing leverage to a man who murdered their envoy under a flag of truce. But no one refuses because the alternative is staying in Kabul and starving to death. Pottinger is ordered to join the hostages. He refuses violently. I will not give myself into the hands of a man who butchered Macnaghten and paraded his body through the streets. Shelton argues with him. Elphinstone, carried into the meeting on a litter barely conscious, begs him, "Your presence will ensure our safety. Major Akbar Khan respects you. You defended Kohistan. He knows your worth. He'll kill me the moment I'm in his power. Please, Pottinger, for the women, for the children." Captain Colin Mackenzie, who has served with Pottinger for years, steps forward and speaks quietly. "Eldred, if you don't go, they'll name someone else. An officer with a wife with children. Let it be you." Pottinger goes still. His jaw works. His good hand clenches into a fist. Then slowly he nods. "I'll go." Brydon watches from across the compound as Pottinger joins the group of hostages being assembled. The major's face is unreadable, but his shoulders are tight with suppressed fury. They'll never see him again, Brydon thinks. Or if they do, it will be as a corpse. On January 5th, the eve of departure, the cantonment begins the final preparations. What little remains in the storehouses is distributed. Ammunition is rationed. 20 rounds per man for the infantry, less for the cavalry. The artillery crews are given powder and shot for the 6 mounting guns. Enough for 30 rounds per gun if they're lucky. The camp followers are told to pack light, 1 bundle per family. No carts, no furniture, only what they can carry on their backs. Many don't understand. They followed the army for years, accumulated possessions, built small lives in the margins of the British occupation. Now they're being told to abandon everything. Brydon sees women standing in doorways, staring at piles of belongings they have to leave behind. Cooking pots, blankets, children's clothes, the small treasures that make life bearable. They take what they can and leave the rest. That evening, Brydon makes a final round of the cantonment. He passes the lines of the 44th Regiment. The men are checking their weapons, cleaning muskets, sharpening bayonets. They're professionals, disciplined, but Brydon can see the fear in their faces. 200 men of the 44th, commanded by officers who know what's coming. Captain James Skinner, the senior captain, moves among his men, speaking quietly, steadying them. "We've marched through worse," Skinner tells them, though everyone knows it's a lie. "We're Her Majesty's 44th. We do not break." The men nod, but their eyes say otherwise. Brydon moves on to the SEO lines. The battalions of the 27th, 35th, and 37th Bengal Native Infantry are formed up in their company areas. These are professional soldiers. Some have served the East India Company for 15 years, fought in campaigns across India. They're loyal, disciplined, but they're also far from home, commanded by British officers who failed them at every turn. He hears them talking quietly in Hindustani. Some are writing letters to families in Bengal, though they have no way to send them. Others are praying Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, each to their own gods, asking for protection in the mountains. Near the artillery park, Brydon finds the 6 mountain guns that will accompany the column. 9-pounders, light enough to be pulled by a few men or a single horse. The gun crews are loading ammunition, solid shot, case shot, a few explosive shells. Not much. An artillery subtin sees Brydon and shakes his head. 6 guns, Doctor. 6 guns to defend 16,000 people across 90 miles of hostile territory. Might as well bring a pocket knife to a sword fight. Brydon doesn't disagree. He returns to his quarters and checks his preparations one final time. His pony is in the stables, barely fed, but still standing. He's hoarded what grain he could. Fed it to the animal at night when no one was watching. The pony is scrawny, ribs showing, but it has the tough, wiry look of the Afghan hill breeds. It might survive where the pampered cavalry horses will fail. His medical kit is packed. Bandages, scalpel, 2 bottles of laudanum, his entire remaining supply, a few surgical needles. His pistol is loaded, 12 rounds of ammunition in his pocket, and the papers in his cap, letters from Scotland, from his sister, from home. He folds them carefully and tucks them into the lining of his military cap. He sits on his cot and stares at the wall. Tomorrow, 16,500 people will walk out of the cant and into the passes. Most of them will never come back. Brydon knows this with absolute certainty. The only question is whether he'll be one of the few who survives. He lies down fully dressed, his kit beside him. He doesn't expect to sleep, but exhaustion pulls him under within minutes. He dreams of Scotland. Green hills, cold rain. His sister's voice calling him home for supper. He wakes 2 hours before dawn. The cantonment is already stirring. Voices, footsteps, the creak of leather, and the jangle of harnesses. Somewhere, a child is crying. Brydon stands, straps on his kit, checks his pistol one last time, and steps outside. The sky is black, starless. The temperature has dropped below 0. 16,500 people are preparing to leave. Almost none of them will survive. The column moves like a dying serpent. Brydon rides near the middle, positioned with the medical staff and their carts. Ahead of him, he can see the rear ranks of the 44th Regiment of Foot, 200 men in red coats marching in formation. Behind him stretches the vast mass of camp followers, a river of humanity 5 miles long, moving at the pace of the slowest child. It's barely past dawn. They've been moving for 20 minutes, and already the formation is breaking apart. The plan, such as it was, called for the cavalry to lead, followed by the infantry regiments, then the artillery with their 6.9 P-pounder mountain guns, then the baggage train, and finally the camp followers protected by a rear guard. The plan lasted approximately 10 minutes. The road east from Kabul is narrow, choked with snow, flanked on both sides by high compound walls. The cavalry at the front, what's left of the 5th Light Cavalry, now mostly dismounted because their horses were eaten, can barely move in columns of 2. The infantry tries to maintain formation, but the road is too constricted. The artillery struggles to move the guns through snow that's knee-deep in places. And the camp followers have no formation at all. They surge and bunch. 12,000 people trying to move through a space meant for hundreds. Carts overturn. Families get separated. Children fall and are nearly trampled. The column halts, starts, halts again. Progress is agonizing. 1 mile per hour less. Brydon rides with his medical kit strapped to his saddle, his pistol tucked into his coat. His pony is nervous, head tossing, sensing the tension. He pats its neck and keeps it moving forward. Around him, the other medical staff struggle with their carts. 3 carts carrying bandages, medicines, surgical instruments, the entire medical infrastructure for 16,000 people. The carts are heavy, pulled by emaciated horses that can barely walk. Within the first mile, One cart overturns. Medical supplies spill into the snow. Bottles of laudanum shattering, bandages scattering, instruments lost in the drifts. The medical staff try to salvage what they can, but the column is moving and they can't stop. Brydon watches morphine and quinine, precious, irreplaceable medicines, disappear into the trampled snow. The first death comes before they've cleared the outskirts of Kabul. A camp follower, an old man carrying a heavy bundle, collapses in the snow. Heart failure, probably, or simple exhaustion. People try to help him, but the press of the crowd is too great. The column moves past him. Within minutes, he's trampled. No one stops. The road winds through the outskirts of Kabul, past compounds and houses. The walls are silent. No movement, no faces in the windows, but Brydon can feel eyes on them. The entire city is watching. 2 miles from the cantonment, the road widens slightly. The column spreads out. The pace increases. For a moment, officers begin to hope that perhaps the worst fears are unfounded. Perhaps Akbar Khan will honor his word. Then the first shot cracks out. A British officer of the 5th Light Cavalry, Lieutenant Henry Harding, jerks in his saddle and falls. His horse bolts. Men shout. The column halts, bunching up. Everyone looking for the source of the shot. Another crack. ASEO from the 37th Bengal Native Infantry drops. And another and another. The rooftops come alive with muzzle flashes. Afghan Yazilayals, long-barreled muskets accurate to 100 yards, begin firing from the compounds on both sides of the road. The shooters are invisible, firing from loopholes and parapets, dropping back before the British can return fire. An officer shouts, "Form line." Return fire. But there's no room to form a line. The road is too narrow, the column too compressed. The infantry tries to return fire, shooting blindly at rooftops. Most shots hit nothing but mud brick. The Afghans fire methodically. One shot, reload, another shot. They're not trying to stop the column. They're bleeding it. Casualties mount rapidly. Officers are targeted first. Their uniforms mark them as valuable. Within 20 minutes, 3 more officers are down. Captain Robert Anderson of the 5th Cavalry is shot through the chest. Lieutenant William Sturr, the garrison engineer, is wounded in the leg, but manages to stay in his saddle. The SEO battalions take heavy losses. The men of the 27th and 35th Bengal Native Infantry march in formation, but they're exposed, unable to take cover on the narrow road. Men drop in their ranks. The formations tighten, close the gaps, keep marching. The camp followers panic. 12,000 civilians, most unarmed, many barefoot, suddenly under fire. They scatter in every direction, pushing against the military formations, breaking whatever cohesion remains. Families are separated. Children are lost in the crush. Brydon watches a woman, a camp follower, carrying an infant, struck in the back by a giselle ball. She falls face first into the snow. The infant rolls free, screaming. A man, perhaps her husband, perhaps a stranger, scoops up the child and keeps walking. The woman doesn't move. Brydon dismounts, pushes through the crowd, checks her pulse. Dead. He remounts. The column has already moved past him. He spurs his pony to catch up. The sniping continues for the next 2 hours. Crack, crack, crack. Each shot deliberate, spaced out, impossible to predict. The column learns to flinch at every sound, but flinching doesn't help. The bullets come anyway. Captain James Skinner, commanding the rear companies of the 44th Regiment, tries to organize a response. He positions sharpshooters to watch the rooftops, orders them to fire at muzzle flashes. It helps slightly. A few Afghan snipers are hit, but for everyone killed, 2 more take their place. By mid-morning, they've covered 3 meters. 200 people are dead. The road is littered with bodies. British soldiers, CO, camp followers. Some are stripped already by scavengers, who dart out from the compounds, take weapons and valuables, and disappear. Ahead, the road begins to climb into the foothills. Beyond that, visible in the distance, is the entrance to Khurd Kabul Pass, the first major killing ground. They reach the entrance to Khurd Kabul Pass at noon. The gorge is a 5 mm defile between sheer cliffs, barely wide enough for the column to move in single file in places. The road is rough, strewn with rocks and ice. The cliffs rise 100 feet on both sides, their tops lined with Gil's tribesmen, thousands of them. Brydon can see them from half a mile away. Fighters positioned on both sides of the gorge, their long jezails resting on rocks waiting. The British column has no choice. This is the only road to Jalalabad. To turn back is to return to Kabul and starvation. To go forward is to enter the killing ground. They go forward. The column funnels into the gorge and the Gils open fire. The cliffs erupt with gunfire. Hundreds of tribesmen positioned on both sides, firing down into the compressed column. The sound is deafening, a continuous roar of gunfire echoing off the rock walls, so loud it becomes a physical pressure against the eardrums. Men and animals go down in heaps. There's nowhere to take cover, nowhere to run. The column is trapped in the defile, compressed into a narrow space less than 20 feet wide in places. Unable to maneuver, the cavalry tries to charge ahead, break through the pass. Horses are shot and fall, blocking the road. Men try to drag the carcasses aside. More shots. The men fall. The infantry attempts to return fire. The 44th Regiment forms ranks, as best they can in the confined space, aims at the cliff tops, fires volleys, but the Ghilzi are too high, too well protected behind rocks. British volleys hit stone and empty air. The artillery tries to deploy the mountain guns. They manage to unlimb, load them with case shot, and fire at the cliffs. The explosions are spectacular, showering rock fragments, but the damage is minimal. The tribesmen are too dispersed, too well covered. And while the artillery reloads, the Giselle fire continues. The camp followers are trapped in the center of the column, crushed between the military units ahead and behind. They have no weapons, no protection. They can only huddle together and hope the bullets miss them. They don't. Brydon's pony is grazed by a bullet, a shallow wound across its flank. The animal rears, nearly throws him. He holds on, grips the race, gets it under control. A bullet winds past his head, close enough that he feels the air displacement. He dismounts, leads the pony on foot. Safer to be a smaller target. Around him, the medical staff are being decimated. One of the 3 medical carts is hit. A lucky shot strikes the driver in the head. He falls. The cart veers off the road and overturns, spilling supplies down the slope. Bandages, bottles, instruments, all lost. Brydon sees a SEO, a man from the 27th Bengal Native Infantry, shot in the chest. The man staggers, looks down at the wound, blood soaking his uniform, then crumples. Brydon can't stop. There's nothing he can do. No time to treat the wounded. The column keeps moving, stepping over bodies, pushing forward, because forward is the only direction left. Lieutenant Sturt, already wounded in the leg for the morning sniping, is hit again, this time in the shoulder. He stays on his horse, his face white with pain, but he doesn't fall. Captain Skinner moves among his men of the 44th, keeping them steady, preventing panic. Hold formation. Keep moving. We'll be through this soon. It's a lie, but it's a necessary one. The gorge goes on forever. 5 meters. 5 meters of continuous killing. The column moves at a crawl. Every H 100 yards costs lives. 10, 20, 30 people dead for each small advance. The snow underfoot turns red. Bodies pile in drifts where the road narrows. Brydon sees a group of camp followers, women and children huddled together, struck by a volley of Ghazal fire. 3 women fall, 1 child. The survivors scream, but cannot stop. cannot bury them, can only keep moving. The fighting is relentless. The Ghilzi have unlimited ammunition, it seems, and unlimited patience. They fire from the cliffs. January 13th, 1842. The biting cold of the Khurd Karbel Pass in Holland, Afghanistan, is a stark contrast to the hellish scene unfolding. Remnants of a once proud British army, 16,500 strong, now lie scattered, victims of a disastrous retreat from Kabul. Their journey, which began just a week earlier, was supposed to be a safe passage. Instead, it became a death march. The agreement with Afghan tribal leader Akbar Khan was simple, a peaceful withdrawal, but promises were broken. From the moment they left the city, the column of soldiers, women, and children was relentlessly attacked. The freezing weather, combined with a constant barrage of sniper fire from the surrounding hills, decimated their numbers. The pass, a narrow, treacherous 5-mile gorge, became their tomb. Amidst the chaos, a lone figure, Assistant Surgeon William Brydon, moves through the carnage. He was part of the rear guard, a small group desperately trying to protect the stragglers. Now, he's one of the few left standing. His medical skills are useless against the sheer scale of the slaughter. All he can do is bear witness to the end of an army. By the time the sun sets, the rear guard is all but gone. Only a handful of officers and soldiers remain. General Elphinstone, the army's commander, makes a desperate choice. He and another senior officer surrender themselves as hostages, hoping to save the women and children. This act of sacrifice leaves the remaining survivors leaderless, their fate hanging by a thread. Under the cover of darkness, a small group of about 65 men, including Brydon, make a break for it. They know their chances are slim. A road ahead leads to the fortress of Jalalabad, their only hope for safety. They ride through the night, exhaustion gnawing at them, the ghosts of their fallen comrades behind them. The next morning, they reach the village of Gandamak. Hope flickers for a moment. They try to negotiate for food and safe passage, but it's a trap. Negotiations break down, and the final, brutal confrontation begins. It's a desperate last stand. One by one, they fall. Only a handful manage to escape the chaos on horseback, Brydon among them. The race to Jalalabad is on. Pursued relentlessly, the survivors are picked off. Brydon, wounded and riding a dying pony, pushes on. He sees the walls of the fortress in the distance, a symbol of salvation. As he approaches, a sentry spots his lone figure, a blood-soaked apparition emerging from the wasteland. The gates of Jalalabad swing open. Dr. Brydon, the sole survivor of the main force to complete the journey, stumbles in. When asked where the army is, he can only reply, "I am the army." His survival is a miracle, but it's a lonely one. His story becomes a chilling testament to one of the greatest military disasters in British history, a grim reminder of the price of imperial ambition in the unforgiving mountains of Afghanistan. Skinner sees Brydon and nods. "Doctor, still breathing, I see. For now, how are your men?" Skinner looks at his regiment. 200 men left Kabul this morning. He counts them now. 160 men lost in one day. "We'll hold," Skinner says quietly. "As long as we have ammunition in daylight, we'll hold." Brydon hears what he doesn't say. When the ammunition runs out, when the darkness comes, we'll die. Around the perimeter, the camp followers huddle in family groups. Mothers clutch children trying to share body heat. Old men sit alone, too weak to move. The cold is merciless. People begin to freeze within the first hour of nightfall. Brydon passes a family, a woman and 3 small children. The youngest, an infant, is silent, too silent. The woman rocks the child, humming softly, but Brydon can see the truth. The infant is dead, has been for hours. The woman either doesn't realize or can't accept it. He keeps walking. There's nothing he can say that will help. Near the artillery park, the gun crews are trying to protect their 6 mountain guns. They've lost 2 horses already, shot in the pass. The remaining animals are dying of exhaustion and starvation. The crews discuss abandoning the guns. They're heavy, slow, almost useless against enemies on cliff tops. But the guns are all they have, the only artillery support for 13,000 people, so they keep them. At midnight, a commotion rises near the center of the camp. An emissary has arrived from Akbar Khan. The British officers gather around a small forbidden fire to receive him. Brydon stands at the edge of the circle watching. The emissary delivers his message in Persian. Captain Colin Mackenzie translates. Akbar Khan sends his regrets for the unfortunate attack in Khurd Kabul Pass. Rogue elements, tribal forces beyond his control. He still wishes the British well, but the column is in danger. More tribes are gathering. To ensure safety, more hostages must be provided. Senior officers, their families as a guarantee of good faith. The officers argue. Some want to refuse. Others say they have no choice. Brigadier Shelton, one of the few senior commanders still with the column, makes the decision. We agree. Prepare the hostages. Families awoken in the freezing darkness and told to gather their things. Children cry. Women weep. Officers who've served together for years embrace, knowing they'll never see each other again. Lieutenant John Sturt is among those selected. His pregnant wife will go with him into captivity. Sturt sees Brydon and raises a hand in farewell. Brydon raises his hand in return. Then the hostages are led away into the darkness toward the Afghan lines. The camp settles into silence again. Brydon returns to his pony and sits beside the animal, leaning against its warmth. He pulls out his pistol and checks the chambers in the moonlight. 12 rounds. He's fired none yet. He tucks the pistol back into his coat and pulls off his cap. The papers are still there. Letters from Scotland, from his sister, from home. He unfolds them carefully, his fingers numb, and reads by moonlight. The words are familiar, comforting. A different world, a different life. He folds them and tucks them back into the cap's lining. Around him, the night is filled with sounds. Crying, praying, the low moan of wind across the frozen ground, and underneath it all quieter, the sound of people dying. A child calling for water that no one has. A CO whispering prayers in Hindi, his voice growing weaker. A woman singing a lullaby to a child who will not wake. Brydon doesn't sleep. He sits beside his pony and watches the stars wheel overhead. By dawn, another 150 people have frozen to death. The camp followers suffer the worst. Families who huddled together for warmth are found frozen in circles, locked together by ice, their bodies already stiff. The SEO battalions lose dozens. Men who sat down to rest and never stood again. The British regiments fare slightly better. The 44th maintains discipline, forces men to stay on their feet, to keep moving. But even they lose men to the cold. When dawn breaks, gray and cold and merciless, the survivors rise and prepare to move. 13,500 left Kabul yesterday. 11,000 remain. They've traveled 8 meters, 82 miles to Jalalabad. Brydon mounts his pony. His hands are so cold he can barely grip the reins ahead. The road climbs higher into the mountains. More passes, more killing grounds. Behind the snow is red. Bodies are scattered across the hillside. British soldiers, sepoys, camp followers, women, children. No one buries them. There's no time, no tools. The ground is frozen solid. The column moves east. Day 2 begins. January 7th, 1842. Dawn breaks over the column, and with it comes the realization that the hostages were taken for nothing. The attacks resume within an hour of sunrise. Afghan cavalry sweeps down from the hills, firing into the flanks of the column. Ghilzai tribesmen harry the rear guard. Snipers on distant ridges pick off officers and soldiers, anyone whose uniform makes them visible. Brydon rides in the middle of what's left of the formation, his pony struggling through snow that's now waist deep. The road has disappeared entirely. The column navigates by instinct, following the low ground between hills, hoping it leads east toward Jalalabad. It doesn't always. Twice during the morning, the advance elements take wrong turns and the entire column has to backtrack, wasting hours, burning energy no one can spare. Each time they reverse direction, more people collapse in the snow and don't rise. The column is no longer a military formation. It's a refugee stream. 11,000 people stretched across 2 miles of mountainous terrain, held together only by the fact that they're all moving in the same direction. The military units try to maintain some cohesion. Captain Skinner's companies of the 44th Regiment still march in formation, though their ranks are thinning. The SEO battalions of the 27th and 35th Bengal Native Infantry keep their organization NCOs shouting orders in Hindustani, holding men together through discipline and habit. But the cavalry has largely disintegrated. The 5th Light Cavalry, once a mounted unit of professional horsemen, is now mostly on foot. Their horses were eaten in Kabul or shot in yesterday's fighting. The few remaining mounted officers ride animals so weak they can barely walk. And the camp followers, 10,000 civilians, mostly women and children, have no organization at all. They cluster in family groups, extended kin networks, groups from the same village or the same regiment. They follow the soldiers because the soldiers are the only protection they have, but the soldiers can't protect them. By mid-morning, the column reaches a small abandoned village, a cluster of mud brick compounds built into the hillside. The officers call a halt. People collapse where they stand. Brydon dismounts and ties his pony to a wooden post. The animal's head droops, its breathing labored. He examines the wound from yesterday. The graze on its flank is scabbing over. No sign of infection. He strokes the pony's neck. Ammunition is running dangerously low. Officers shout at their men to make every shot count as Afghan cavalry charge toward the village. British artillery fires case-shot devastating blasts from small 9-pounder mountain guns. At close range, the effect is brutal, cutting down riders like a massive shotgun. But the guns reload slowly, and between shots, the Afghans surge closer. Tribesmen break through the southern perimeter. Hand-to-hand fighting erupts. Bayonets clash, men shout, and many fall. Brydon crouches behind a wall, saving his pistol rounds. When an Afghan rushes him with a sword, Brydon fires and drops him. 11 rounds remain. After 2 hours of savage combat, the British hold the village, but the cost is terrible. 200 dead, 300 wounded, and ammunition nearly gone. Soldiers of the 44th Regiment have only 10 rounds per man. Brydon sets up a crude aid station, treating whoever is brought to him. He cleans wounds with snow, stitches cuts with the last of his thread, and gives what little medicine remains. Many injuries are beyond saving. One officer asks if he will reach Jalalabad. An hour later, he is dead. When the order comes to move out, half the wounded cannot walk. With no stretchers or carts, they are left behind. Brydon watches helplessly as men he treated sit against walls, knowing the Afghans will find them soon. The column staggers back onto the road, climbing higher into freezing mountains. Snow reaches chest height in places, and men collapse from exhaustion. By nightfall on January 7th, they have covered only 5 miles. Another 1,000 people are dead. 9,000 remain. The second night is worse. The temperature drops to 30 below zero. With no shelter or firewood, people freeze where they sit. Families die huddled together. Officers struggle to keep their men awake, knowing sleep means death. Command is collapsing. General Elphinstone has been taken hostage, and Afghan emissaries now demand Brigadier Shelton and the remaining senior officers surrender as well. Desperate and exhausted, Shelton agrees, hoping to buy time. After their departure, the highest-ranking officer left is a 28-year-old captain, suddenly responsible for thousands. By dawn on January 8th, Another 1,500 have frozen to death. Only 7,500 remain out of the 16,500 who left Kabul. That day, the column enters the deadly Tangi Tariki Pass. The Afghans are waiting. Trapped in the narrow gorge, the survivors are attacked from every direction. British units try to form defensive squares, but the enemy fights like relentless skirmishers. Regiments are overwhelmed and shattered. Brydon is caught in the chaos, bullets flying past him. He joins Captain Skinner and the remnants of the 44th Regiment, now fewer than 100 men, forming a desperate square around terrified civilians. They fight for hours until they finally break through. That night the temperature drops to 40 below zero. People simply sit down and never rise again. By January 9th, fewer than 5,000 survivors remain. The organized army is now a scattered stream of broken people. Afghans pick off stragglers at will. Medical supplies are gone. Strength is gone, only the instinct to keep moving remains. Brydon meets Captain Skinner one last time. The 44th is down to 50 men with 3 bullets each. Brydon plans to push ahead on horseback, his only chance. Skinner refuses to abandon his soldiers. An hour later, Afghan cavalry attack the rear. Brydon hears distant gunfire. Within minutes, the 44th Regiment is destroyed. Captain Skinner is dead. Still, the column moves on. By afternoon, Brydon joins a small group of mounted officers preparing a desperate ride for Jalalabad, their final hope. "Your pony looks stronger than most," one of the officers says. Brydon turns and looks back at the column, thousands of exhausted people stumbling through the snow, wounded, starving, and dying. Perhaps 4,000 remain. He thinks of the oath he took as a surgeon. First, do no harm. His place should be with the sick and injured. But he has no medicine, no supplies, and no way to help them. Finally, he makes his decision. "I'll come," he says. The mounted officers plan to make a desperate ride for Jalalabad at dusk. As the day passes, the small group moves faster than the main body. A soldier approaches Brydon, begging for water. He gives away the last of his flask. By late afternoon, 12 mounted officers have gathered, all prepared to abandon the column. No one speaks it aloud, but everyone understands the plan: ride hard through the night, leave behind anyone who cannot keep up, and hope to survive. At sunset on January 9th, the temperature drops sharply. Captain Sutter gives orders. Single file, no talking, no stopping. Brydon checks his nearly empty medical kit and his pistol, 10 rounds left. He looks back one last time at the thousands of helpless people scattered across the frozen hills, then turns east. The ride begins in silence. After hours in the freezing dark, they realize one rider has disappeared. No one goes back. Near midnight, an Afghan patrol appears. Gunfire erupts, and the officers spur their horses into a desperate gallop. When they slow, another rider is missing. 10 remain. By dawn, the horses are near collapse. One officer is forced to shoot his exhausted mount and continue on foot. He soon falls behind and is lost. The group dwindles further as they struggle through valleys and snow-covered hills. Afghan forces block their path, forcing them to turn back and find another route. One by one, more horses fail and more officers are left behind. Taking shelter in an abandoned village, they are briefly attacked but escape during the night. 7 officers remain. Brydon's pony is barely alive, yet he pushes on. By January 11th, only 6 mounted men are left. As Jalalabad comes into view, Afghan riders give chase. Brydon is attacked and nearly killed, saved only by letters folded inside his cap that soften a sword blow. Wounded and bleeding, he continues alone after the others scatter. His pony finally collapses 1 mile from the fortress. Brydon thanks the loyal animal, then begins to walk. Exhausted, starving, and barely conscious, he stumbles the final mile. British soldiers rush out to meet him. Inside the gates, General Sir Robert Sale asks, Where is the column? Brydon, covered in blood, answers simply, I am the column. 16,000 people had left Kabul. After 7 days of horror, only one man reached Jalalabad alive. The rest were dead, captured, or scattered across the frozen mountains. The disaster was complete. You need rest, doctor, and food. When did you last eat? Brydon thinks. 3 days ago, maybe 4. I don't remember.
They bring him water, which he drinks slowly, then thin soup he can barely keep down. Around him, the Jalalabad garrison is in chaos. Officers run between buildings demanding information. Riders are sent to search for survivors. Preparations begin for a relief column, but Brydon already knows the truth. There is no one left to relieve. An hour later, General Sales sits beside his cot. Tell me what happened from the beginning. So Brydon tells him everything. The cantonment Macnaghtens murder, the decision to trust Akbar Khan, the retreat through Kabul, the ambushes, the massacre in the Khurd, Kabul past 3,000 dead in one day, the hostages taken, the final collapse of the column. He speaks without emotions, just facts, numbers, events. When he finishes, Sale is silent. 16,000, he finally says. The largest British force in Afghanistan gone, yes, sir, and you are the only one who made it through so far. Brydon replies quietly. Sale stares out the window at the mountains. When London hears of this, there will be investigations. Someone will be blamed. The people responsible are dead, Brydon answers. Sale turns back. Then they will blame Afghanistan, and we will return with more troops and more guns. Brydon thinks of the passes, the winter, the tribesmen who melt into the hills. We'll try, he says. But Afghanistan doesn't lose. It just waits. Over the next days, a few survivors trickle in: an Indian sepoy who hid in a cave for 3 days, 2 privates who pretended to be dead, an Afghan guide who blended into the tribes. In total, fewer than a dozen soldiers reached Jalalabad on their own. Of the 16,500 who left Kabul on January 6, 1842, fewer than 100 will ever see freedom again. Brydon becomes the face of the disaster. Newspapers call him the sole survivor of Kabul. The image spreads across India and Britain: an exhausted, bloodied man arriving alone at Jalalabad, with the message that an entire army has vanished. On January 20th, General Sales summons him. Dr. Brydon, you are being sent back to India to recover and deliver a full report. What about the hostages, sir? An army of retribution is being assembled. General Pollock will march in spring, but that is no longer your concern. You have done your part. Brydon leaves Jalalabad 2 days later, riding back through the Khyber Pass, the same mountains that swallowed 16,000 lives. He carries letters from home, medical notes and memories he will never escape. By February, news reaches London. The public is furious. Parliament demands answers. How could an entire army be destroyed? Who was responsible? The dead are blamed: Macnaghten for trusting Akbar Khan, Elphinstone for weak leadership, Shelton for arrogance. This time they are prepared, well supplied, disciplined, supported by artillery. The Khyber Pass is forced in 3 days.
By September, Pollock marches toward Kabul along the same route as the doomed column. What they find is horrifying passes filled with bones, uniforms, children's shoes, fragments of lives scattered across the snowfield. Too many dead to bury. The mountains themselves have become a graveyard. Kabul is retaken. 95 hostages are rescued. Less than 1% of those who left Kabul return alive. Pollock orders reprisals. The Great Bazaar burned, villages destroyed, prisoners hanged. Revenge, not justice. Then, in October 1842, the British withdraw. No treaties, no victory, no gains. Only 16,000 dead. The First Anglo-Afghan War ends exactly where it began, with the British back in India and Afghanistan unconquered. Brydon returns to England, hailed as a hero. He does not feel like one. He testifies before inquiries, attends dinners, answers endless questions. People want tales of bravery. He gives them only uncomfortable truths. What was the worst moment? Someone asks him. Brydon thinks of frozen children, dying soldiers, screams in the dark passes. All of it, he replies. The nightmares begin: snow that never ends, voices calling for help, Jalalabad always in sight but never closer. He wakes reaching for a pistol he no longer carries. He tries to live normally. He becomes a surgeon in Scotland, marries, raises children. But part of him remains in Afghanistan forever. In 1857, he returns to India during the mutiny to serve as a medical officer. When asked why he went back, he answers simply, because men were dying, and I am a surgeon. He never says the rest, that he feels he belongs with the ghosts he left behind. William Brydon dies in 1873 at age 61. His headstone reads, Survivor of Kabul, 1842. The journal he leaves behind contains one final entry. I rode on because to stop was to die. I lived when 16,000 died. I do not know if I am blessed or cursed. I can only carry them with me. The lessons of 1842 seem clear. Don't occupy what you cannot hold. Don't underestimate terrain, logistics, or culture. Yet empires forget. Britain returns in 1878, withdraws again. In 1919, another war, another withdrawal. In 1979, the Soviets invade. 10 years later, they leave defeated. In 2001, NATO arrives. 20 years later, they depart as well. The pattern never changes. Afghanistan does not defeat empires with armies. It defeats them with mountains, winter, and patience. 16,000 people left Kabul in January 1842. One man reached Jalalabad 7 days later. The causes are easy to list: poor leadership, arrogance, broken promises, brutal terrain. But lists cannot capture the reality. The reality was civilians freezing in the snow, soldiers dying without ammunition, impossible choices with no good answers. History calls it a military disaster. For those who lived it, it was simply horror. The passes of the Hindu Kush still stand, snow still falls, and somewhere beneath it, the bones of an army remain. If this story moved you, remember it. Remember Kabul, 1842. Remember the 16,000. And remember Afghanistan, the graveyard of empires.